Welcome to the Greater Irvine Chamber Innovators Journey podcast series, where we explore the stories, strategies, and lessons learned from early-stage and entrepreneurial business leaders shaping the future. Your host today is Dave Coffaro, President and CEO of the Greater Irvine Chamber.
Well, welcome to the Greater Irvine Chamber Business Insight Podcast. I'm Dave Coffaro and pleased to be with you today. Today's episode is an innovator's journey, and that's where we visit with local leaders in the innovation community to hear their story, where their business is today, how they got there, what's going on, what's next, all of it. And today, my special guest is Ramin Mousavi, CEO of CathWorks. Ramin has a rich background in the innovators community, working with smaller, early-stage companies and mature companies like Edwards Life Sciences and Baxter International. So, Ramin, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm excited to have you as a guest.
Thanks for having me on, Dave.
So, for starters, would you share a little bit about your professional background prior to joining CathWorks and kind of what led you to where you are today?
Sure. I at one point in life I was an engineer. Coming out of school. It's been too long, and I think real engineers will be offended if I claim I'm an engineer. But I started my career in high tech, and after that in actually aerospace. So spent a few years doing actual technical work. And then I went back to school at UCI, Paul Marshall School of Business, and did my grad school there. And that became the pivot point for me to switch to healthcare and medtech. And I spent a decade, a little over a decade, at Edwards Life Sciences. I was there, and as you mentioned, I also held responsibilities at Baxter, which was the parent company of Edwards. Edwards spun off out of Baxter before joining CathWorks now to end of 2018. I think we're coming a long time. Time flies fast.
Yeah. So what was that transition like going from being in aerospace to medtech? Because that's kind of a big transition. How was that for you to pivot from one to the other?
I end up being one of those people who, people go to grad school, get an MBA, and they say, hey, you can leverage your MBA to switch your function. So get into a more business center function, or you can leverage your MBA to switch the industry that you're in, or sometimes people use that to just switch companies within the same industries. I did all of them. I went, from a whole new company, new sector, and obviously new function. I think what helped was actually my technical background became the common language I shared with the research and development folks, and I was able to maybe help fill a gap that existed at the time, which was the conversation between the marketing team and organizations and folks that worked in R&D. That became the transition. But I think there's a question behind your question, which is, when you're trying to do these transitions in your career, there has to be a give and take. I mean, in a successful career, you always are looking for opportunities to take on jobs that you're learning more. That's one of the satisfactions you get from the growth in your career. But it has to be such that as you're learning, you're also giving something back, and it has to be a right balance. I think it could be fine that even if you're learning more than what you're giving back, but it can be that you step in and there's nothing that you offer to the setting. So I learned that was the value of the technical background, and through my career has been proven to me over and over that there is a value for people who have the technical background. There's a difference between inventors and innovators, but people who have a technical background, even if they're not an inventor, they can be an innovator.
I love what you said, Ramin, because I think it's so important, especially for people who are earlier career, to think of it in terms of what are my skills, what are my competencies, what can I contribute, but not be attached to where. Because when you've got that sort of flexibility, It opens up so many opportunities, and right here in Irvine and Orange County, we've got so much going on in med tech and other areas of technology, whether it's aerospace or whatever, that ability to adapt and say, "What do I bring to the party and where can I take the party?" Right? So that's a really great message. So every great innovation starts with an idea. What was the innovation, the inspiration that led to the formation of CathWorks?
So, maybe I just zoom out for a second, a couple of kind of facts that I think are very relevant to the topic. As I'm sure you're familiar, because we have a lot of successful, great cardiovascular companies here in Orange County and in Irvine. Uh, the number one cause of death is cardiovascular related, basically, uh, um deaths. Of those, close to 43% of those is what's known as coronary artery disease. This is where a blockage gets formed inside your arteries and it stops the flow of blood. We commonly hear that so and so had a heart attack. And then we always hear, they had it out of nowhere, but technically that's not the case. There was something leading into it, you just didn't know. Uh, the latest American Heart Association data shows that still 2 out of 5 patients, about 40%, go misdiagnosed or undiagnosed for this number one cause of death. In the world, by the way, we're talking about 1 million people in the US and about 18 million globally every single year. So now, a lot of work is being done. A lot of innovation is being done in the past 2 to 3 decades to come up with tools and technologies that will enable physicians, in this case, interventional cardiologists and cardiologists, to be able to get a better understanding of what's happening inside somebody's coronaries and basically be preemptive in managing the disease, whether being a medical therapy and putting patients on drugs, and or intervening, whatever is right form of intervening. Most common one being putting a stent inside someone's heart, but there are other basically therapies that could be used. The challenge that we have seen is that even though these technologies have been developed and a lot of good work is being done in developing a very strong clinical body of evidence. As you know, in healthcare and medtech, if you really want to have an impact, you need to invest in doing large randomized clinical trials so you can demonstrate that the outcomes of the device you're offering is actually better than whatever is the current standard of care. So in this case, for measurement of this blockage, there has been for over a decade, close to 15 years, what is known as basically a level 1A of evidence. Is as good as it gets. It meets all the criteria of an independent, peer-reviewed clinical data. Yet the rate of adoption of the technologies have been very slow. The reason behind that is these technologies were invasive, so it required you putting basically a catheter or a wire inside an artery to do basically a single point measurement. Basically you measure the percentage of the blockage, and if the blockage is more than certain percentage, usually 20%, the physician knows they need to intervene. So the concept behind CathWorks came from there. Actually, I just talked about, you have inventors and you have innovators. The inventors of what we do, we're inside the lab. It's a collaboration between a very, very smart computer vision, as scientists, as well as a interventional cardiologist. And what they saw, the one of the co-founders of CathWorks, he was frustrated with the limitations of these invasive technologies, and his challenge to the group was that there's got to be a better way of doing it. So what they thought of, at the time, it was a crazy idea. Now we are in our 11th year as a company, but 11 years ago this sounded like a crazy idea. That can you take a routine angiogram? These are x-rays that they take inside the cath lab. Can you take multiple of those and build an accurate, non-invasive 3D model of artery. So you can do the same assessment that needs to be done using the wires going inside the artery without doing that. That's the innovation behind it, and it is going after a very known problem with this bold idea that maybe you can do this non-invasively and do it image driven versus a catheter wire driven measurement.
So it seems like there's probably a lot of benefits to that. First of all, it's non-invasive, but second of all, it seems like it's a lot more accessible for more people. Is that the case? And what's the status today of the company? You talked about where you came from, but what does it look like today in terms of the way you're engaging with the market?
Yeah, so the major benefits, as you mentioned, by its non-invasive nature, you eliminate the risk, of putting a wire or a catheter inside someone's heart. It doesn't come without a risk, even though the prevalence of the incidence is low. The risk of hurting the patient is high. To do the invasive measurements, you need to also combine that by giving some additional drugs to stabilize the heart. We don't need that. But most important is we are now able to do this in a faster way. You know, it doesn't require all those additional tools, and you get a much more comprehensive picture of someone's artery, including additional tools that since we've introduced that allows you to actually virtually size up what size of stent you got to put inside someone's heart and what happens if that blockage wasn't there, and then be able to come back later and see whether you're able to solve the problem or not. So we kind of went after all the barriers to adoption that the invasive technology had. CathWorks is now at a stage that is best described as a later stage, full commercial, global startup. We have a product that has gone through rigorous clinical studies, and it is regulatory cleared in the US, in Japan, in Europe, and we're working on expanding that indication to other parts of the world. We entered into a partnership agreement in 2022 with Medtronic. It's the largest medical device company in the world. Among other elements of that agreement, we started to immediately co-promote the product together, across the world in a very methodical way that allowed us to have access to a established, existing, reputable channel. And Medtronic made a significant investment on, our ongoing innovations. We all to stay as I used to describe this as a world best funded, a startup. And this happened to happen in years that, as 21, 22, 23, and even part of 24 were not the easiest years for innovators to be able to raise money. We got shielded from those challenges in those years. So our team was able to put their head down and run really fast. We created a very succinct strategy that said we will accelerate innovation, we will expand the clinical evidence that was around the technology, and we work on the education and adoption of it across the world. And the team on both sides, by the way, CathWorks team has grown significantly since, but our partners on the Medtronic side have made significant investments, and it's been a very interesting journey to see this go from a concept to become a standard of care at the hospitals that we go. We are now at hundreds of hospitals across the globe. There have been thousands of physicians who've been trained on this, and hundreds of thousands patients who benefited from the technology. And I think we're just scratching the surface. I think the best is yet to come.
So there is a long distance between where you started and being a late stage global startup with the world really opening up to you. With every startup, every innovative company, there's always challenges. What have been a couple of your biggest challenges and how have you navigated those, Ramin?
Yeah, we were actually at a local meeting here in Orange County. I'm sure you're familiar. There's this a global meeting now called LSI that brings innovators and investors and strategics and everybody together. And it was one of the panels that they showed this interesting stats that said out of venture-backed companies, 10%, 1 out of 10, end up continuing to exist, and 25% of those, which becomes 2.5% of the whole, basically achieves what was envisioned for it. And what's funny is we always remember the other side of the story where things go well, but I think innovators live with the bruises of the mistakes that we made and the things that didn't go well. And frankly, I think that's the only valuable lessons we ever can give each other, because successes require certain timing. Things have to be in the right place. You can't really replicate that, but you can definitely learn from other people's mistakes and not making those mistakes. We, as fascinating and as novel the topic, the concept of technology was, um, we fully and wholeheartedly failed once. At our first go-to-market strategy, um, it was a train going to the wall at the full speed, because we were as passionate and as excited about the technology as I am today. The same level of enthusiasm. The technology wasn't ready. You know, uh, in a most simple way, a lot of what needed to be done had to be done manually. You need an operator to do a lot of work manually. And what we learned is that the integration into workflow was critical. And those manual steps and the time that would take was just not acceptable in a hectic workflow of a cath lab. Uh, this combined with the small thing called COVID put a full, break on what we were trying to do. Now, our team, very, keeping with the spirit of being innovative, thought about how they can solve that, and became one of the very first practical integration of artificial intelligence into a software-based medical device. And they, for most part, automated all of those manual steps using the AI. So, but while that's exciting, and we talk about it now, it came from that failure, of trying to go, and we couldn't go as fast. So I would say that is probably a turning point for us in the organization, a hard one, a very challenging one. And these are the ones that you got to be able to, work your way through to be able to survive. It's always good to look back and see it work out, but they have a tendency of going either direction, so you can't really guarantee what direction they go.
Yeah, you gotta keep focused and keep driving and so you're kinda speaking to the fact that running a company like you do, it has its ups and downs. It can be a roller coaster ride. What keeps you motivated and focused when things get tough?
You know, they they if you think about the opportunity that comes in doing what we do. I'm not a physician by background. I think there's a privilege in what physicians and healthcare providers do in impacting people's life. From our perspective, we are not close. We are way, way in the back of the line, but we still have an ability to impact patients' lives. And um, because the prevalence of cardiovascular disease is so high, everybody knows someone who's impacted by it. So it is personal at all times. Um, the motivation for our team is this mission. We put this mission in place for CathWorks, which is to partner with physicians to transform, bold word, transform how cardiovascular disease is diagnosed and treated. That's a driver. I think everybody, honestly, otherwise there are easier jobs to go do. Whenever we interview someone, I usually end up being the last person interviewing everybody that we add to the team. And I always tell them as a last thing to the people we really want, it's like, are you sure you want to do this? Because there are easier things to do. But if you appreciate the privilege that comes with, hey, we could actually help change how people get treated. We can bring this a little further along so they can get diagnosed. So the what I was referring to, so and so got a heart attack they didn't know. If you can impact even a handful of those each year, those are lives we've impacted. That's a driver. I think we are all very, very much driven by the power of innovation, which I think is the only thing that changes healthcare. Bringing that innovation in, and then we are surrounded by great group of people all along. We have a fantastic team. We have fantastic partners. We get to work with fantastic physicians. Uh, the service ecosystem that is around us, globally and here in Orange County, is of groups that you enjoy spending time with. And at the end of the day, if you're gonna spend so much time doing what we do, you want to enjoy being around those people. I mean, that's a big driver for us because we actually have fun doing what we do. We take what we do very serious. We don't take ourselves that serious.
You have great passion, Ramin, for what you do. It comes through loud and clear. And when you talk about the mission for the company, to me, it sounds like if people sign up to be transformational, that is a big, big commitment. So it is definitely for people who really want to change the world, but you have an opportunity to do that and you're doing that. That's fantastic. We have time for one more question. And the last question I have for you, and I think it's one that everybody who listens wants to know, for aspiring entrepreneurs who want to follow in your footsteps, learn from you, what's one piece of advice that you wish you would have gotten when you were earlier on in your career, when you were starting out?
Ooh, yeah, and my disclaimer is that I spent a good amount of my career early on in large companies. So I don't know if I was one of those people who knew him and I have the entrepreneur inside me until somebody else figured out that they gave me the shot, which I'm grateful for. I say this. Uh, there's not much guaranteed in life. As I said, successes are a function of different things. A lot of things you can control. There's one thing for sure the case, that by taking the step of being an entrepreneur, you're making a bet on yourself. And I think that is the biggest vote of self-confidence you can give yourself. And that doesn't mean that it's gonna work all the time. Even serial entrepreneurs who are very, very successful have as much, if not more, failures than their successes. But the one thing that they have figured out and they're very comfortable with, and I now very much appreciate, is you bet on yourself. And it's a little bit like insider betting, because you're betting on yourself and then you can outwork anybody else. You can't always outsmart other people. There will be other people who are smarter than you. That's part of life, but you can outwork other people if you're really passionate about it. So I wouldn't say advice, I would just say, it is comfort comes with a price. you know Comfort means you're not taking risk, and of course risk comes with a price. You're going to be in that ambiguity. I would do this over and over and over again if I get a chance, knowing that there's no guaranteed. Because there's one thing that I know for sure: we will make decisions and they're gonna have impact. Sometimes we make bad decisions and they're gonna have impact. In the world of being able to decide and actually have an impact versus just meet to meet and then have another meeting in preparation of another meeting and not really knowing what was the impact of your decision. I think that's the one you do. So if there's anybody who is especially if there's younger people who want to do that, I want to admire them to have that courage. I did not have it that early. That by itself I think is a good quality, and give it all you have. Don't discount yourself. You're betting on yourself, and that is something.
What a fantastic message. Bet on yourself. There is no better bet to make. Ramin Mousavi, CEO, CathWorks, thank you so much for being our guest today.
Dave, thank you, and thank you to your team. I think we are very much privileged to be where we are in the world. Sometimes we take it for granted, and it's not just the weather. I know we have fantastic weather and a great a great environmental setting, but we have a fantastic ecosystem. I think you guys do a fantastic job bringing it together, keeping it together, give us a reason to be part of it. So I appreciate all the work that you and your team do at the Greater One Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you so much. And folks, thank you so much for listening. Have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for joining us for the Greater Irvine Chamber Innovators Journey podcast. To stay informed about upcoming episodes and other important business news, please subscribe to our channel or check the Greater Irvine Chamber website and mobile app.